Oh boy. Hi guys, today we're going to find out just how much you have to spend to make Wriothesley good, just like I did for the new V8 video. By this I mean how much you have to spend in terms of Constellation investment, weapon investment and potential needed teammates. In my pre-release analysis about him, I concluded that he's just decent, but he has some flaws that hold him back. So let's see if by spending money you can fix this issue and make him better. Right off the bat, his Constellations come out swinging, because his Constellation 1 basically changes the functioning of his first passive completely. Normally, his first passive will grant his charge attack a damage increase and healing properties whenever he falls below 60%, with a cooldown of 5 seconds. So these are two big restrictions. This cooldown here in particular, 5 seconds, makes it hard for Wriothesley to stay HP neutral, since he will be losing 4.5% HP every normal attack he uses during his elemental skill stance. The funny issue here is that on teams without a healer, he won't be able to stay above 50% HP all the time, and he needs to stay above 50% because otherwise he loses some elemental skill buff hits for the normal attacks. Meanwhile, on teams with healers like Kokomi or Bennett, he won't be able to fall below 60% HP most of the time, so his buffed charge attack won't have any real consistency. What I'm trying to say here is that either way, this passive doesn't work very well at Constellation 0. But of course, MiHoYo knew exactly what they were doing, because with the Constellation 1, they took that crippled passive and made it very good actually. The first difference between the Constellation 0 passive and the Constellation 1 passive is that it doesn't strictly need to be below 60% HP to pull off the buffed charge attack, but he will also be able to do that when he uses his 5th normal attack of the chain. Additionally, the cooldown of the passive is reduced from 5 seconds to 2.5 seconds. And with this alone, actually all the problems of the Constellation 0 passives are fixed, since you will be able to use his charge attack more frequently, which fixes the issues you have with the no healer teams, and you will also be able to use it in teams where you have healers. So it just makes his passive more present. And on top of that, there is more, because this Constellation 1 will also increase the damage bonus of the charge attack by 150% compared to Constellation 0, and also it will extend the duration of his elemental skill by 4 seconds, which isn't a gain in terms of increase for calculated damage for the whole rotation, because Wriothesley's rotation are already perfect for his support's uptime, and extending it will just make him exceed that uptime. So this Constellation is way overloaded, because in terms of damage, it's a consistent significant upgrade, especially for the teams with no healer, since you won't have the issue where you fall below 50% HP anymore, and your elemental skill will be much more active as a result. And since this practically makes him HP neutral with new combos, he will also feel less squishy. So it's both a comfort Constellation and a damage gain Constellation, reminiscing of Hutao's Constellation 1 in a way. Personally, I have no problem saying that this Constellation 1 is probably the best Constellation 1 we've ever gotten, because it single-handedly makes a lot of his teams much better, and his outlook quite promising. So basically, if you pull for this Constellation 1, you might feel like you have a whole different character. Way to start, Wriothesley. Before we move on, if you enjoy my theory crafting and my videos, you can show your support by subscribing and leaving a thumbs up to this video here, and also following me on Twitter. The Constellation 2 gives his elemental burst a damage buff depending on how many stacks of his second passive he has activated. This second passive can get up to 5 stacks, and it will get a stack every time Wriothesley's current HP changes, which in worst case scenario means that he will get full stacks when Wriothesley uses his first 5th normal attack in the combo chain. So basically, if you get it to full stacks, it will grant his elemental burst a full 200% damage bonus. Basically, I don't know if you're familiar, but this is a copy and paste of Wanderer's burst design. At Constellation 0, his burst isn't worth spending extra energy recharge substats for to use it every rotation, but at Constellation 2 it becomes worth it, and It also changes the rotation as a whole, because now you need to use it at the end, and you can't use it at the start anymore, because you need to stack up those stacks for the passive first. This last factor is actually pretty bad, because if you use it at the end, that means that the burst won't benefit from things like Bennett's buffs, or very decent vanilla resistance reduction effects, because they will already be expired. You can also technically fix it by using the elemental burst midway through the elemental skill duration, but that means you won't be able to use as many normal attacks and charge attack as possible, because you will lose time for the elemental skill uptime. Still a damage gain, just not as much as it could have been. The Constellation tree is obviously very good, because it increases his normal attack talent by 3, which is obviously great, because his main ways of attacking are charge attacks and normal attacks, which both get buffed by this constellation. It's something they started doing with Fontaine, adding the normal attack talent increase to the constellation instead of just elemental skill and burst constellations. So that's great, and it has a very significant impact. The Constellation 4 increases the healing effect of his charge attack to 50%, which isn't needed, but it's nice to have. It also gives him an attack speed buff of 20% for 4 seconds if he gets overhealed while he's on field. Overhealed means healed over 100%. Or it gives an attack speed to all the party members if he gets overhealed while he's off field, an attack speed of 10% for 6 seconds. Since the Constellation also increases the healing of the charge attack, you will be able to get this overhealing effect quite consistently, and it makes his rotation tighter, allowing him to potentially pull off more normal attacks, but it also allows him to use the elemental burst while he's still buffed by things like Bennett's burst. So it potentially increases the damage of the burst and the value of the Constellation too. The Constellation 5 increases the talent level of the elemental burst by 3, which is nice after you got the Constellation 2, which made the elemental burst more valuable, so it's a decent increase for his overall damage. His Constellation 6 focuses on the charge attack, which is interesting since in his base kit the charge attack is secondary compared to the normal attacks, but with the Constellation 1 it definitely became more important. So the Constellation 6 grants the charge attack an increased crit rate effect and also a crit damage bonus, while also doubling the damage it will deal. Basically, it's an extreme and consistent damage increase, and of course it's very good because it's a Constellation 6. Why shouldn't it be? Looking at you, Raiden. In general, if we start looking at extreme wave level, so we consider somebody like Constellation 6 Shenhe, which will make her Icy Quill basically permanent for normal and charge attack users like Wriothesley, we're looking at a really enormous damage increase, because it will get the Icy Quills for all the normal and charge attack uses, and then for the elemental burst at the end. So it's a match made in heaven. So as a whole, all of Wriothesley's constellations range from good to fantastic. Especially the Constellation 1, since it's a good damage increase as well as a complete playstyle change, and they will definitely make a big difference if you decide to go for them compared to Constellation 0 Wriothesley. Regarding his signature weapon, it is obviously very good because it has all the stats you will need on Wriothesley, as well as an attack speed buff which will allow him to do better combos, but interestingly enough, it is often almost matched by Wanderer's signature, which also has a series of buffs that benefit Wriothesley hugely, as well as normal attack speed increase, which allows it to pull off the same combos you'd pull off with the signature. But the big difference between the two weapons is that Wriothesley's signature increases charge attack damage, so it scales much better with Wriothesley's Constellation, which make the charge attack a much more meaningful damage tool. If you lack those two options, then things become more tricky, because Lost Prayer, for example, is only situationally able to keep up with the other better options, since its high crit rate stat makes it a bad fit for all the cryo teams where you get Cryo Resonance or Freeze, which unlocks Blades Earthstrayer. So you get a lot of surplus crit rate, which makes it hard for you to balance the crit rate substats on artifacts. Felicity has a pretty nice free-to-play option in Ballad of the Boundless Blue, which is the new event weapon, since it has a passive that basically parallels the signature passive by giving him both normal and charge attack buffs, and it gives him enough energy recharge to make him able to use the burst every rotation, which is great for Constellation 0 and even better for Constellation 2 scenarios, since his burst becomes better in that situation. In terms of reliance on specific characters, Wriothesley doesn't really suffer from that, because he has a lot of different types of teams in monocryo teams, freeze teams, melt teams, hyper teams, all with kind of different characters, and all of them are relative compared to each other, excluding the melt team, which DPS wise is a bit above the others, but ignoring this, he has a lot of possible teammates he can use. He doesn't even depend on specific cryo buffing characters like Shenhe, because as a cryo character, he has access to teams that can use Yelan, Bennett for melt teams, Kazuha almost always, so he really has a lot of options that can make him at least decent in terms of team damage. Even ignoring best options, he can do things like swapping Shenhe out for Rosaria on melt teams, which is still good because the reverse melt team with Rosaria is proven to work. I went more in depth about his weapons and possible teammates on his pre-release analysis, so check that out to find out more. I don't want to repeat myself. So overall, I would say Wriothesley is definitely high on the pay-to-win scale, I guess, because he has Constellations that are very good and change his playstyle in a significant way. He has a signature weapon that is very good and by far the best option unless you have Wanderer's signature, which I feel is quite rare to have for some reason. So it's definitely a character that will feel usable at Constellation 0, but it will feel much better if you decide to invest a lot of money on him. Yeah, that's unfortunately the case.